Hello art beaters, Becky here with a new video and I hope you enjoy. If you want to keep up to date on all things art beads, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel right now. Enjoy! Welcome! We have a brand new video for you today and I hope you're excited because we have lots of stuff to share. Hope you're ready to get inspired by some beautiful jewelry, maybe even learn a little something new. We've got tons of stuff to take a look at and I'm so excited to jump in with you guys. So hopefully you're ready to get inspired to make some pretty jewelry and see some exciting new things. We've got lots to look at. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about peyote stitch. I'm going to be going over the flat peyote stitches, so odd count and even count peyote stitch, kind of talking about how to do those stitches and sharing some jewelry inspiration made with those techniques. Hello everyone. So it's a jam-packed show. We have lots to talk about. So let's dive right in. So I just wanted to talk about how to do the flat stitches, even count and odd count. Wanted to talk about like all the different things you could do once you learn that stitch and how to look at patterns and read patterns. So this is some inspiration from our design studio, and some of these are personal projects of mine. I've been on a huge peyote stitch kick lately, so we've got all kinds of inspiration to take a look at. But let's talk about first how to do the peyote stitch and the different techniques. So the first technique that we're going to talk about is even count peyote stitch. So even count peyote stitch is, I would say, the more approachable version of peyote stitch. It's easier to finish the rows on even count peyote stitch. So it's just alternating rows and they always form an even number of staggered columns. And this PDF diagram is available on our website. You can print it out and it tells you exactly how to do peyote stitch, even count peyote stitch. And we also have step-by-step photo tutorials, videos for how to do this stitch. We have lots of resources for you. So even count peyote stitch is a little more approachable than odd count. They're both really easy though once you get the hang of them, but people like to start with even count peyote. And I've got some really big beads here to kind of show you. So I'm going to start with 6 beads like the diagram here. So 1, these are really big. I'm used to working with small beads. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to add, you can add a stopper bead to the end of your thread or one of these little bead stoppers, either way, just to make sure your beads don't go flying off the end there. 4, 5, 6. Okay. So all you got to do, so these are going to be your first 2 rows. So I've got 2 rows of 3 beads for these staggered rows. So this is going to be your first turn, and all you have to do here is go through not that first bead but the next bead. So now you're starting your 3rd row. So that's something to keep in mind. Those first beads that you add in a straight line on your thread are going to be the first 2 rows. And then you're going to skip over that 3rd bead and go through the next bead. And it's kind of squirrely when you first start because you don't have your rows formed up really nicely. The nice thing about smaller beads is they're really easy to grip in your hands to keep those rows straight. We also sell quick start peyote cards, which help you start your rows. If you have trouble starting the peyote rows, those are going to be really helpful. And then go skip over that bead and go through that bead. So you can see I've got my first 3 rows started, and then to start the next one, it's really similar. You just go through that top staggered bead. And then go through, skip over that lower staggered bead and go through the next top staggered bead. Easy, easy, easy. So that's even count peyote. So turning on even count peyote, starting the rows is really easy because that even amount means that you're not going to have to do any special turns on the ends of your rows. So people really like to start with even count because it is really easy to get started. And again, we have all kinds of other different videos, tutorials, diagrams for how to do this technique on our website, artbeads.com. I've got links to all of them in my video description. So you can see how easy and fast it is to get started. With these big beads, you can make a lot of progress in no time. With those smaller beads, it's going to take a little bit longer to get some length, but it does look really intricate and fun. So that's how you do even count. So really easy, and we've got all of these steps here in the diagram, and we even tell you how to kind of weave your thread into the peyote stitch to secure it, and then you can trim it. And then odd count peyote is similar, but this one will have a center point. There's an odd number of staggered columns, and it does require a little bit of an extra step. But it's super easy, and there's different ways to accomplish it. So I'm gonna show you how I do that here. Where'd my thread go? What do I do with that thread? Oh, it's up here. I do that all the time when I'm beading. I'll set my thread or my beads in a different spot, and then I'm like, where did it go? Or I have a big pile and I can't find them. The life of a beader. All right, let's see. So odd count peyote is very similar to even count. Again, we have this PDF diagram, which is really helpful, and it shows you all of the different ways to start the peyote stitch and make the turn. There's several different ways to do it. I will show you the ways I like to do it. Let's get my needle threaded. I'm getting really good at threading needles. Sometimes that's a little nerve-wracking when you're live, but I can do it. So odd count peyote is going to have an odd number of staggered rows. So we'll do 7 like the diagram shows. And again, and the nice thing about peyote stitch is once you have like a few rows established, you won't need that stopper bead on the end of your row. And you definitely, for the technique I'm going to show you for odd count, you're going to want to get rid of that stopper bead at some point. So we've got 4 on there, 5, 6, 7. So we've got an odd number of beads. And you're going to start it similar to even count peyote. So you're just going to pick up that next bead. So that, remember, these are your first 2 rows. And you're starting your 3rd row with that turn. And you're going to skip over that last bead and go through the next bead. And that's going to start the staggered rows. So we're going to do it very similar to even count. But once you hit that odd side, you're gonna have to do a little special move. So this is where it gets a little different, and this is what I like to do. So we're starting we're almost to the turn, so we're just adding our next bead in this staggered row. Oh, don't be afraid to jump into peyote. It goes by super quick once you've got it. Okay, so we've added our last normal bead. So as you can see, we don't really have any way to skip a bead and go through the next bead like we did in the even count. We just have that last bead there. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. So the way I like to do it is go through this bead here, this last bead. So when you add that last one, you'll not only be going through this bead, but you'll also go through that bead. And then what I like to do is you're going to add your bead here. And then you're going to go back through this bead here. Oh, and I'm getting tangled with my stopper here. There we go. So you're just kind of going back through that lower bead. But then you're going to have to make your way back to this guy here. So what I'm going to do to get, because I need my thread to come through here so I can start that next row. So you're just going to have to weave through some beads. So I'm going to go through this bead. Yeah, I can't wait for you to try peyote stitch either. And then come back through here. So I'm going back through those last 3 beads to get my thread positioned back to where I want it. And then up through here. And now I'm ready to add the next row. And there's another way you can do this. Let me add a couple more rows to show you. So now I'm back to my normal peyote stitch. It's so funny to work with these really big beads. Completely different feel. So on this side, it's going to be like even count again because we have that bead to go through. So one side is always going to feel like even count. And then once you get to that other side, you're going to have to do that special odd count turn. Again, we have PDF diagrams, as you can see here. We also have videos for how to do this. So those are really helpful. So then we're back here to do the odd count. So this is a different way that you can do the odd count. So once you've got that one lined up where you want it, then you bring your tail up like this. And then you're going to catch that tail. So I'm going around the tail and back through the bead I just added. And that will bring your tail up. And then you don't kind of have to do those crazy turns like you did before. So that makes it a little bit easier. And then you just add the next bead. So I like that method a lot because it makes that turn. You don't have to weave through as many beads. And we have diagrams how to do that and videos as well. So that makes it really easy, but the thing you have to remember about that is you have to make sure that your tail is going to be the complete length of your finished piece. So you have to leave a really long tail to do it that way because you're catching your tail as you add each row. So you have to have a long tail. So just keep that in mind if you're going to do that. It makes it really easy to do the turn, but you just have to keep that in mind. I have made my tail not long enough for that, and you can kind of fudge it and like go back to the technique where you're weaving through beads, but it's a lot cleaner if you keep that in mind to keep your tail long. So that's a couple different ways to do the odd count peyote stitch. You can see that there's a few different ways, and we do have the diagrams for all of that. So just keep that in mind. And then once you've got both even count and odd count down, there's all kinds of different things you can do with that technique. I love this. So this is just even count peyote stitch, and it's just simple, and you can add little picot edges, stitch in buttons. You can embellish your peyote stitch by stitching embellishment beads on the top of the stitch like we did here. This is just a simple peyote stitch band, and it was attached to a centerline cuff. So that's really pretty. Add some texture to your cuffs. You can make peyote stitch rings. So with this, you would just be zipping up the ends of your peyote stitch. And we do have a tutorial for how to do that. And the same technique you can use with carrier beads to make these cute little decorations for your carrier beads. So carrier beads are made to be covered with peyote stitch bands, and I like to make ones that slide. So this is my trick or treat bracelet. So you can see there's a trick or a treat on each side. And then I also used that same concept for my 12 Days of Christmas necklace. So I've got the number of the 12 Days of Christmas and then the corresponding little partridge in a pear tree. We've got 2 turtle doves, so you can kind of count down to Christmas with this
necklace, 3 French hens. So fun. I love, love, love making little slidey peyote stitch bands for your carrier beads. So that's fun. And then you can do some variations on peyote stitch, flat peyote stitch. There's 2-drop and 3-drop peyote stitch. So same technique, but you use 2 beads in the place of 1. So it makes a little bit of a different look there. And then I've been having a lot of fun with odd count peyote stitch. So I'm making tapestries of the 6 wives of Henry VIII. I've been really interested in their history, and I've seen a lot of cross-stitch patterns that do the 6 wives of Henry VIII. So I wanted to make a peyote stitch pattern. So I'm making these tapestries. This is Catherine of Aragon, his first wife. And then this is Anne Boleyn. And then I just finished Jane Seymour, his 3rd wife. So these are odd count peyote stitch, and I did use that that technique where you catch the tail of the thread to start the next row, and that made it go a lot faster for me. So really fun. I'm going to make all 6 of his wives, and I'm going to stitch him up as well, and then I'm going to frame them all together. I think that'll look really pretty. So these are not in the ARTBEADS design studio, but they are on my personal Instagram page. And I've also made some unicorn tapestries. I really love the medieval unicorn tapestries, and so I made some peyote stitch tapestries based on those. So I'm having a lot of fun with peyote stitch. And these, I think you could turn these into cute Christmas ornaments, add some ribbon to the top. So peyote stitch is really great. And then you can also do some 3D dimensional stuff with peyote stitch. So this is not my pattern. This is from a place called Thread-A-Bead, and they have a whole train set you can make. And these are, it's all peyote stitch variations. So really great little cute little beaded train. I want to make all the little train cars, and one of the train cars has a little advent calendar blocks to count down the days to Christmas. So I think like every year I'll try and make another car of the train, but so cute. So once you learn peyote stitch, the sky's the limit. You can do all kinds of cool things. And I did want to talk about reading peyote stitch patterns and how to do that. So a lot of our patterns are going to look like this for peyote stitch. So reading patterns is pretty easy once you get it. And this one's super easy. There's only 4 colors. Sometimes when you have more colors, like for something like this, I needed the colors to be lettered, so I knew which colors I was looking at. So super easy. So with something like this, you're gonna start, this is gonna be what you string on first, these first 2 rows. So I like to kind of take a look, and I know I'm going to need to string on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 of those turquoise beads for the first 2 rows. So I've got those strung on, and then I'm going to need to start my 3rd row. So how I like to mark patterns like this as I go, I like to put a dot as I add beads. Now for something like this where it's all the same color, I'll just dot the whole row and then do the row, so I don't have to dot between each bead because they're all the same color. But that helps me keep track because the rows are staggered. So once you've got that row, then this is going to be your next row. So I'm going to dot all these to know that I've already done that row, and just keep doing that. That really helps me keep track. So I did that with this unicorn tapestry here. I just marked off the beads as I added them. For something like this or like this, there's a lot of colors in here. So some patterns that you're going to come across are going to be letter patterns like this. Now, the first time I saw something like this, I was really intimidated. But this is actually really easy to read, and when you're doing something with a lot of colors like this, it makes it so much easier, and it goes a lot faster. So really, this is super easy. So rows 1 and 2, because you string those all together in one line, that's why it's showing the colors for rows 1 and 2 here. So on something like this, you're going to have letters for all of your bead colors. So as you can see, letter N is this color, letter O is this color. So what I like to do for something like this is I have my beads in little tubes, and I like to use little stickies, little sticky note, the little tab stickies, and I write the letters, the corresponding letters, and stick those to the bottom of each little seed bead container. And so then you know what color you're picking up. So 3F, so that means you're going to pick up the color that's letter F, 3 of those beads. 1 color E bead, 2 color F, 1 color E, 1 color H, 1 color A, 2 beads of color I, 9 beads of color A. And so that's what you do. And then, so that's your first row. And those are all strung together. Now you're going to start staggering the rows. So 1B, pick up 1 of color B, go through that last bead in the previous row. 2A, you're not going to add 2 of color A, but that's how many beads are next in the row. So I'm going to pick up 1 of color A, do my peyote stitch. Pick up another of color A, do my peyote stitch. Then I move on. I need 2I, so I pick up 1 of I, do my peyote stitch, 1 of I, do my peyote stitch, move on. And I do like to mark these off as I do them. I didn't mark these off because this was like, I messed up, and then I had to I had to unweave this project all the way back to row 4. So then I just picked up from row 5. So, but that worked out for me showing you how these word charts work. So if you see this, do not be scared. And a lot of the times these come with instructions for how the word charts work. But when you're using a lot of colors, they work really well. So I like this, and it's kind of a little scary because it's nice to have the visual graph to see, like, am I doing this right? So I usually have like a visual graph printed out and my word chart so I can just kind of make sure that it's going the way I want, but this will work a lot faster for something like this where you have a lot of colors. So those are a couple different peyote stitch patterns that you're going to encounter if you're doing other people's patterns, and especially if you're doing something with a lot of colors, you're going to see those word charts pop up. So make sure to check out those video descriptions. We've got a lot of jewelry inspiration in our design studio for peyote stitch, as well as instructions, step-by-step tutorials, PDF diagrams, and videos for how to do those stitches. And then once you've got that down, try tubular peyote stitch, try Cellini spiral. Those are all variations of peyote stitch. You can do so much with that stitch. So I hope that inspired you and helped you learn peyote stitch a little bit. There's a lot you can do with it. I really love peyote stitch. Karen, I added an extra bead to 3 rows. Do I start the bracelet over, or can I take out just the 3 rows? Yeah, so I messed up a lot doing these just because there's so many colors and sometimes I miscounted. You don't have to start over all the way. If you added the wrong color or an extra bead, you can just go back and take out the rows. So I can kind of show you here. So let's say I messed up this row, like, oh, those were the wrong colors. You can easily undo the row by row. Now that was very painful for me when I messed up. I had my colors off on my chart for this one because I made up my own pattern. So I had to go back quite a ways, and I did do it like that. In cross stitch, they call something like this frogging. I don't know if you would call it that in peyote stitch, but I guess you're kind of frogging the rows like you would frog the frog the rows in cross stitch. So you can go back, and then once you get to the part where you messed up, you can just continue stitching back and fixing your mistake. So I hope that helps you, Karen. Yay! Okay, I'm so glad that you guys were inspired by all of that. How did you get the pattern to go from a cross stitch to a peyote stitch? Oh, no. So I did not, these were not cross stitch patterns to begin with. I had just seen a lot of cross stitch patterns with the Tudor Wives theme, and I wanted to do that myself.
So I made these patterns myself with a bead pattern software. They are inspired by artwork. So these are inspired by actual portraits from the time of King Henry VIII, and also some beautiful art made by the Balbusso twins for Alison Weir's novels about the Tudor wives. I highly encourage you to take a look at those. And if you head to my Instagram, I have a stories highlight for these tapestries that I'm working on, and I do have pictures of the artwork I was inspired by. So I made these patterns by myself. They weren't made from a particular cross-stitch pattern. I don't know how you could convert a cross-stitch pattern to something like peyote stitch. I think that might work with brick stitch, but cross stitch is a little more lined up. Maybe something like square stitch would work for a cross stitch pattern, but certainly something fun to play around with. So no, I did not start with a cross stitch pattern. I made that pattern up from some artwork that I was inspired by. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that this was inspiring and informative, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. So with that, go out and bead.